For the next question, we received several inquiries about something I missed at first because Chris Jericho has blocked me on Twitter.
Oh,
That's all right.
He won't block me. He gets too much publicity off of me.
That's exactly what it is. And if you notice, more and more AEW people are mouthing off at you on Twitter because it gets them the attention that they can't get otherwise. Like Matt Hardy's now jumped into that fray.
I did not see this.
Oh, I will pull that up momentarily.
Oh, I'm sure you will, you little disturber.
But I guess Chris Jericho had a comment to make about the New York Times Best of 2020.
Yes.
And I'll read what they have here. I am a subscriber to the New York Times, and they have a Best of 2020 list that goes across the arts. And what they voted, or what they anointed as being one of the best of 2020 was Maxwell Jacob Friedman doing Me and My Shadow on All Elite Wrestling. Some weeks, the athleticism at this professional wrestling startup is more exciting than anything happening in Vince McMahon's empire. And no one in the WWE has this kid's combination of diction, Juilliard by the way of Long Island, intensity, or cheesiness either. Even when Friedman's lost his cool, his nom de ring is MJF, he still has astounding control. The character is part heel, part tool. Hair gel, loafers, Burberry bling, tacky, and part Goodfellow wannabe. His mouth does more running than he does. For reasons only the producers of this show can explain, a long segment in October between MJF and the veteran Chris Jericho culminated in a version of Me and My Shadow, complete with dancing women and live singing. It was less than spectacular, though not for anything Friedman did. He wasn't embarrassed at all. He was smooth, in a way that should worry Ric Flair. This kid makes you want to say, woo. That's from the New York Times.
Yes, so let me just summarize. So basically, they were saying for reasons that we cannot fathom, these people busted into song on a wrestling program, and it was less than spectacular, but at least this one guy in this goofy thing was pretty good and didn't get any on him. Is that pretty much the summary?
Well, it's that, and it's also MJF. Not Chris Jericho, it's Maxwell Jacob Friedman is immensely talented, and also Chris Jericho, a veteran wrestler, was a part of this as well.
Yes, that's why I'm saying this one guy in this thing didn't get any on him, talking about MJF. It was not very complimentary to the bit or anyone else involved.
Well, once again, Chris Jericho, proving that you're in his head, tweeted out the article and wrote, huge props from New York Times for MJF and Dinner Debonair. Once again, proof that pro wrestling comes in many shapes and forms. But the most important thing is that it entertains. In other news, the Louisville dipshit Times is still whining about it. Now, obviously, it didn't overtly name Jim Cornette, but when one thinks of the Louisville dipshit Times, who else could they be referring
who else
to?
Could you possibly? I was just going to go with when one thinks of Louisville, but you know, you can phrase it any way you want. But when my attention was called to that posting, I should say, and I just responded that it's amazing that all media outlets that don't like wrestling, don't cover wrestling, don't watch wrestling, and don't like wrestling, like AEW, because there's no wrestling on the program. However, there is an expert wrestling critic on staff at the LDT, and he said the thing sucked balls. And that's when actually, and I got a kick out of some people noticed after the fact that Jericho was tweeting this story around and everything, and they said, did he even read it? They didn't say anything good about him. They were knocking his shit. Yeah. Mentioned in the New York Times for doing something less than spectacular. Wow, we really raised the bar on accomplishment levels these days.
You think it really bothers him, the fact that you call him out for his substandard work in 2020?
Probably, because they're trying to successfully keep up their mass hypnosis on their fan base that somehow doesn't see all the stupid shit and the lackluster talent and the amateur booking and the irresponsibility all the way around that we see, and they want to keep it that way, because if people actually saw what they were really doing, and or sometimes they can when we call attention to it, well, that's not real good for them. And I say, don't do so much stupid shit that we have to pick apart and explain to people. People can see when the shit doesn't look right. I mean, there's all the people that just go, I see Dwarf Dong Sucker on my screen, and I'm not going to watch this because they're not serious. But for some people, they have to have their attention called to it when shit doesn't make sense. And then they understand why they're questioning it in their mind, but they don't understand why. We provide that expert analysis.
The thing is, he really believes he's doing great work. That's the scary part.
No, the Bucks believe. I think Jericho's just trying to make sure Tony Khan doesn't realize that, all this shit's going south. But the Bucks believe they are great. I can believe that because they just have faces that look like they marinate in the smell of their own farts.